Hi, this is Whitney Kurtz Ogilvy, your academic writing specialist, and today we're going to talk about writing personal statements for graduate nursing school applications. And I actually interviewed professors from several different colleges of nursing who sit on admissions boards in preparing this presentation, so this is very much straight from the horse's mouth. If you are a student at the University of Kentucky College of Nursing or a nurse at a University of Kentucky hospital and you need help with a writing project or presentation, I am available to you. There is my email address. If you do not fall into one of those groups, I am not available to you. I'm sorry. This is I'm making this presentation as part of my role as writing specialist for the University of Kentucky. Anybody is welcome to view it on my YouTube channel, obviously, but my one-on-one services are only available to those folks. So what is a personal statement for? Well, first and foremost, it is your first impression. It provides extra detail that you can't really provide on a CV or in a transcript, and it is a way to give you a voice and make your application come alive in a way that simple facts on a page with a resume or a transcript cannot do. It gives you a voice. It can distinguish you from everybody else. You know, everybody is going to have similar work experience, similar classes that they took, and people may have similar GPAs and things like that, but you are the only person with your voice. So it's very, very important. And in fact, when I interviewed professors on admissions boards, all of them agreed that the personal statement weighs extremely heavily on the decision to admit a student. So let's look to start out with at some sample prompts for personal statements from a few different colleges of nursing. This one is from the University of Kentucky, and this is for the DNP program. This might be actually a little out of date. We may have recently changed our prompt, but the general spirit is still the same. And in the University of Kentucky, they actually distinguish between post-BSN and post-MSN. So they ask a little more of you if you have your master's degree. For the post-BSN students, in 1 to 3 double-spaced pages, they ask you to discuss your reasons for seeking doctoral study, including short and long-term professional goals. If you have your master's degree, they still ask for 1 to 3 double-spaced pages, and they still ask for the same thing that the post-BSN students are asked to do. But in addition to that, they also ask you to discuss 1 or more professional issues in your area of interest. Describe a clinical problem you have solved for a particular population or a clinical innovation you developed to improve health outcomes of a particular population. So it's a little more detailed if you have your master's, which makes sense, I think. Not all schools do this. UK does, but not everybody does, so just make sure you follow your prompt. This is from UK's PhD program. 1 to 3 double-spaced pages discuss your reasons for seeking doctoral study, short and long-term academic and career goals, and your area of research interest. Provide a self-evaluation of your motivation, initiative, and the potential for independent learning. Include an example of leadership experience where initiative and self-motivation were important to success. So a PhD program obviously focuses on research, so they ask you about your research interest, and they ask you to evaluate yourself, which is a tough exercise for a lot of people, and so it's a good litmus test for whether someone is really ready to engage in a PhD program. This is from Loyola University in Chicago. This is their master's program prompt. So they ask you for 300 words, and they ask you to describe how your work experiences and professional interests have prepared you to be successful in the graduate program to which you've applied, and how completing the graduate program that you've selected will help you meet your professional goals. Now, if you have noticed that that seems very similar to what was asked of the folks at the University of Kentucky, you are right. There's definitely a common theme, although the prompts can differ a little bit. Most of them will ask you, why did you choose this particular program? Why do you want to pursue a graduate degree? And what has qualified you to do so successfully? This is from Loyola's DNP program. They ask you to describe your personal vision of yourself as a leader in healthcare, discuss how the DNP program will help you to operationalize that role, and provide a statement describing how your work experiences and professional interests have prepared you to be successful in the DNP program. So again, common theme. This is from their PhD program. Provide a statement describing your professional and academic goals, indicate your intended area of research and any faculty mentors in this area with whom you would like to work. You must submit a research or scholarly reference paper as part of your completed application. Now, some schools ask you for a writing sample and some do not. It is very important if you are asked for a writing sample to read carefully what type of writing sample they want. One of the pet peeves that a lot of professors have told me is, for example, in this case, they're asking for a scholarly referenced paper, and people will submit something like a letter to the editor or a short story that they wrote or something like that. That's not what they're asking for here. They're asking for a paper in which you had to use source material, a scholarly paper. So make sure you're giving exactly what you're asked to give in terms of a writing sample. All right, so let's talk about how to get started once you have your prompt in place. I think it's a good idea to start by making an itemized checklist. So take your prompt and break it into individual requirements with every question or every requirement on a separate line. You can use that to plan an outline, to double check your final draft and make sure you don't miss anything. One of the quickest ways to be rejected is to miss something, is to fail to provide something that you're asked to provide, because obviously if you can't follow directions, that does not send a good message to the admissions board. This, by the way, is also a good idea once you get into graduate school. It's a good idea to do this with your assignment prompts. So here's a sample checklist using that post-MSN D&P prompt from the University of Kentucky. So you notice I'm putting every little question and requirement on a separate line, and I have really heavily noted the or down here, because what a lot of people would do there, they're asking you to describe a clinical problem that you've solved or a clinical innovation you've developed. Now, a lot of people would read that and they would do both of those things because they would miss the or. So you want to make sure that when you see words like and or, that you note those so that you only do one of those two things. And again, they can see that you can follow directions. One thing to watch out for with a checklist is sometimes when we make a checklist, it can tempt us to organize our thoughts in exactly the same order that they were in on the prompt. That might not be the best organization. Whatever order your paragraphs go in and your sentences go in a piece of writing, it should be that way because you've thought about it and you've decided that that is the most logical and the smoothest flow of ideas. So unless your application requires a certain order, for example, if they number the items in the prompt, number 1, number 2, number 3, in that case they're probably asking you to do that particular order. But failing that, just make sure that whatever organization you choose, it's purposeful and not accidental. So once you have your checklist, it's important to get organized in other ways as well. So make a note of every application deadline, put those in your calendar, set an alarm to remind you, and allow yourself plenty of time. This is not the time to procrastinate, because you're going to want to be able to plan and write and revise and proofread and hopefully let somebody else cast an eye over your application. And if you're applying to more than one program, it's a really good idea to make a folder for every single school so that you don't mix up materials, so you don't lose anything. Just simple things like that can make a big difference. So it's also a good idea to do some brainstorming before you actually sit down and write. Ask yourself the questions that the prompt asks you, or if your prompt is more general, then you want to hit on the common theme elements. Why do I want to pursue this degree? Why do I want a D&P instead of a PhD, or vice versa? Why am I a good fit for this particular school as opposed to other schools? And think about all that stuff and do what we call a free write, which is you set yourself a timer, so 10, 15, 20 minutes, and you sit down and you are just going to write out whatever occurs to you in response to those questions. You do not need to censor yourself. You don't need to edit yourself. Just give yourself permission to get all your ideas out on paper. Nobody's going to see it but you. And then weed through all the bad stuff and the irrelevant stuff and choose the starting points, the little gems in the dirt. And those will be your starting point for your paper. I think it's a good idea to follow the standard organization for an essay for a personal statement. So it needs to have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. It's important to think about organization, as we talked about, and to use transition words and sentences to ensure a really smooth, logical progression from idea to idea. So think about that. You could choose a chronological organization that's based on time, like, here's my work history. Or it could just be based on a logical flow of main ideas. Just whatever organization you pick, make sure it makes sense. And keep in mind that nobody writes a perfect first draft. So, and that's nobody, including myself. You want to keep that in mind and allow yourself time so that your statement can evolve, so that you can do a couple of different drafts, and most importantly, so you can take a few days off and come back and reread what you've written with fresh eyes. I think we've all had that experience of reading something that we wrote months ago or even years ago and thinking, oh my goodness, how did this make sense to me? It's because when you wrote it, you were too close to it to see it clearly. But now when you come back later and you're not absorbed in the little details of it anymore, you can see it better. It's also a really good idea to ask somebody you trust, a professor, a colleague, a mentor, a writing specialist, for example, for input. It's good to get a second set of eyes, or even a third. Okay, so that's getting started. Now let's talk a little bit about what admissions boards tend to look for in a personal statement. Most programs want information in two basic areas, your motivation and your qualifications. Now, this doesn't mean that you should write a separate section for each of those necessarily, unless they ask you to do that. But you want to think about those two things and how they interrelate. So most admissions boards look for a strong sense of direction. And that just means a very clear rationale for why you want a grad degree and specific goals for both your graduate study and your career after your graduate school is done. They also want to see clear reasons for choosing their program. So have you thought about why you're a good fit for this particular school and how your goals align with theirs? It's also a really smart idea to think about whether there is a faculty member, or even more than one, with expertise in your area of interest that you might want to work with. Now, Loyola specifically asked about this. Not all programs will, but it's never a bad idea to do homework on that. You can go to the school's website and look at their faculty bios, look at their publications. You can go and look those up, or at least read the abstracts for them, and that will give you a good idea of what the career goals and the professional focus of each faculty member are. And then you can decide, who would I like to work with? Is anybody doing a research study that I would like to participate in, for example? And it will blow their minds if you do this, believe me. So when you're providing your rationale for choosing a school, it's a good idea to avoid mentioning their ranking or their level of prestige. In general, you want to be specific. You don't want to just give them generalized praise, like, oh, U.S. News and World Report ranked you number 3. Well, they know that. They don't really want to think of that as your main reason for wanting to attend, because all that is window dressing. They want to see that you really understand the school and what they can offer you and what you can offer them. So they want specificity. Show you've done your homework on the school. Show that you know what their faculty are doing. And focus on relevant connections between you and the school you're applying to. So once you have done your homework on the faculty, if you discover one or more people whose interests align with your own, consider contacting them. Email them, give them a call. Most of the time, faculty are more than happy to talk to students. And talk to them about your mutual interests, about how you might work together. And then if you do that, by all means, mention in your statement that you did that. And that will set you apart, I promise you. Schools love when people do this. So in addition, they want to see clear reasons for choosing the program that you've chosen. So MSN versus DNP versus PhD. They also want to see that you have a good grasp of writing fundamentals, that you can make a coherent, persuasive argument as to why you need and want a graduate degree, and that you are intellectually ready to pursue one. Good writing skills show intellectual readiness to pursue a degree. You're going to be doing a ton of writing and a ton of reading in graduate school, and so the personal statement is important. They really want to see that you have those skills. They also look for, as we said, adherence to the prompt, that you address everything you're asked to address, that you didn't leave anything out or misunderstand anything. They want to see that you have a good understanding of program outcomes and how they mesh with your own goals. So, for example, a PhD program prepares students for careers in research. So if you want a PhD, you should be able to discuss your goals in relation to that outcome. Whereas a DNP is more of a practice doctorate, and so they'll want to see your goals in relation to that. Some schools may ask you to address how you will enrich or contribute to their program. So again, this is where you do your homework on the school. Do you plan to join any organizations or clubs or committees?